Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television. Our major stories tonight: a tragic road accident occurred near Marché des Fleurs in the Douala 1 subdivision today, resulting in 2 fatalities. The victims, that is, a man and a woman, were on board a motorcycle that collided with a heavy-duty truck. The third victim, who is a bike rider, is currently battling for his life at the Douala Lakantini Hospital. Away from that, political analysts criticized Minister Paul Atanganji's recent statement on opposition coalition, arguing that he is overstepping his bounds and meddling in issues that should be handled by the election governing body. The analysts questioned the minister's role in determining the feasibility of opposition coalitions, suggesting that such matters should be left to the relevant electoral authorities. Those are top stories tonight. The news in full in a jiffy. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. Begin with this sad story as an accident occurred in the Douala 1 subdivision, specifically around an area known as Marché des Fleurs, resulting in 2 fatalities and 1 critical injury. The victims who lost their lives were a man and a woman, both on board a motorcycle. The bike rider himself is currently hospitalized at the Douala Lakantini Hospital, as Cedric Chakutio tells us.
Shock and consternation grieved the inhabitants of Marché des Fleurs, a locality in the Douala 1 subdivision. This after a road accident occurred in the locality. According to eyewitnesses, the incident caused the death of 2 individuals on the spot. The incident happened around 8 a.m. The truck was coming at a high speed. The motorbike rider wanted to overtake the truck. The bike rider saw just a small gap where he could squeeze through, and since the truck was also circulating at a high speed, there was no way for him to brake. The bike rider was transported to the Lakantini Hospital, where he is actually receiving treatment. The motorbike driver isn't dead. I took his phone and called a family member. He's currently at the Lakantini Hospital. For now, investigations are ongoing to determine the real cause of the incident. In the meantime, the bodies were transported to the mortuary.
Now we take you to the conflict Northwest region. The once bustling Northwest regional capital, Bamenda, today bears the scars of silence and neglect. Days have stretched into weeks since life came to a standstill, leaving streets deserted, markets closed, and livelihoods frozen. Household waste now piles along the commercial avenue, with children turning abandoned streets into playgrounds. Beyond the emptiness lies a deeper crisis, one where basic rights to education, healthcare, and dignity are quietly slipping away. Our correspondent Booster reports on the city's slowly losing its rhythm of daily life. Her report.
These have turned into weeks since separatist groups declared a lockdown in Bamenda. The city's main streets, once alive with commerce, are now empty. Markets are shuttered, shops closed, and livelihoods on hold. With trash cans now unable to circulate, household waste now piles up along Commercial Avenue, one of the city's busiest boulevards. What used to be a business hub has become an open-air dump site. Animals now graze freely on overgrown grass along the streets, while children use the deserted streets as makeshift playgrounds. Behind the silence lies a profound human toll. Access to education, healthcare, and safe work, all key to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, are being denied.
The imposed lockdowns by separatist fighters in Bamenda and part of the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon result in serious violations of citizens' fundamental rights, while also highlighting the government's duty to protect this right. We have the right to freedom of movement. Citizens are forced to stay indoors or risk violence. This violates Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Cameroon Constitution preamble as well guarantees the freedom to move freely within the country. The right to work and economic freedom. Lockdowns cripple local businesses. Farming, people cannot go to their farms. Daily income activities have been prohibited, And even those operating under the Cameroon Labour Code, they are prohibited to go to work.
For many now in Bamenda, the cost of conflict is not just insecurity, but also the slow erosion of daily life and fundamental rights.
Now we talk politics. Observers have criticized the Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji, for what has been qualified as an aggressive communication on issues concerning the forthcoming presidential election. However, the content of his message on the absolute necessity of peace before, during and after the presidential elections has been uploaded, as Babila Jonathan tells us.
During his visit to Buea, Minister Paul Atanganji dismissed claims that Anglophones in Cameroon are marginalized, insisting any marginalization is self-inflicted.
You go and burn a health center, you go and burn a church, you go and burn a classroom. Then you have a caterpillar trying to do your roast, you go and burn the caterpillar. You are doing harm to yourselves. That is the idea of even Anglophones marginalizing Anglophones.
He urged parents of children rebelling against the state to restore discipline at home.
The parents should talk to their children. All these children in the bushes, they don't come from Jupiter, Mercury, or Neptune. We know where they are. If each parent, if you go and tell the administrative authority that I've not seen my son for 1 year, so if you catch him in the bush, I'm not part of it. Now, the children will know that if we don't have the backings of our parents, they will come out. So most of those still in the bushes are conniving with their parents or with their relatives.
On the presidential elections, Minister Atanganji made what has been described as an ironic remark. He said, becoming a candidate is itself a triumph and that not all contenders seek victory.
A presidential election is an event, very important event in the life of the nation. And just being a candidate to participate is already something which is important. So you don't participate because you have the intention to win. It could be true, but it is more important to understand what the political game is all about. We have to be humble. We have to understand the weight of our political parties. And we should be reasonable enough. A political leader who is present in, we can say, 30 subdivisions out of 360.
His visit to the Southwest region aimed at assessing the level of preparations ahead of the presidential elections. He had a meeting with administrative and judicial officials, as well as the regional head of Elections Cameroon.
And that was Radar Rex Afon reporting on the visit of the Minister of Territorial Administration in Buea, which is a chief town of the Southwest region. Away from that, observers have criticized the Minister of Territorial Administration for what has been qualified as aggressive communication on issues concerning the forthcoming presidential election. However, the content of his message on the absolute necessity for peace before, during and after the presidential election has been uploaded. Babila Jonathan has more.
Don't use the presidential as a pretext for any misconduct, because we'll handle you squarely. The message should be very, very clear.
In what has been qualified as aggressive communication, Territorial Administration Minister Atanganji Paul sends a warning against any misconduct before, during and after the presidential election, a way of talking that observers say could contribute in exacerbating the already existing tension ahead of the October 12, 2025 presidential election in Cameroon.
I think Minister Atanganji is in his element, but he has his own type of personality. Another person will still have said the same thing or pass the same information without being so violent and aggressive. I guess that's the way he does his business. And, he believes a lot in force, so that even when he's talking, he's so forceful. So I don't know when he ever talks peacefully. But the most important thing is that everybody knows that we all need the peace before, during, and after. But we know that it is that kind of talk, that aggressive kind of talk that has made the Anglophone problem to get out of hand. But we are saying that, Cameroonians are used to this kind of hard talk, and just because he talks rough doesn't mean that we should also behave rough.
Another issue which the minister qualifies as confusion is the much talked about possible coalition of opposition parties that could yield a consensual candidate.
So, in all polling stations, we'll have 12 ballot papers representing all the candidates. So the private arrangements that people do in their villages, in their homes, or in the quartier has nothing to do with ELECAM or with the administration.
You cannot go and give your information and then the state spends all that money to print all that material, then you just be to turn around and say you don't want it again. They would have said so before now.
Politician Vincent de Paul Yede says, whatever is happening in the opposition as far as negotiations for a consensual candidate is concerned is not the business of the administration or elections Cameroon. And so, the Minister of Territorial Administration should not interfere in that.
And with the October 12th presidential election fast approaching, political parties and electoral officials in Cameroon's northwest region have agreed on the location of polling stations. But with security still a major concern, authorities are mapping out strategies to ensure the process runs smoothly. Details on the following reports done by our Northwest Chief Correspondent, Bostella.
Northwest region, all 2,529 polling stations will be lodged within 134 public structures. The decision, reached by consensus between Election Cameroon and political parties, takes into account both legal and security requirements, but in a region scared by conflict, questions remain about safety before, during and after the election.
They are promising that the political party will be treated with equal treatment during the period. Normally, in keeping with the laws, they have to do it at least 3 days before the meeting. But taking into account our particular context where we have to mobilize the security forces, we are asking them to declare their meeting more than 3 days before so that we put good security to escort them and good security everywhere they are going to organize their political rallies or meetings.
At Elections Cameroon, the emphasis on transparency and accessibility for all voters.
So we have to first of all identify the structures to be sure that they are either public structures or structures which are open to the public. The second thing we took into consideration was the security situation surrounding that environment, where we thought that, okay, where there were security challenges, we had to agree with political parties to move their polling stations to polling stations in unsafe areas to where there's relative peace for electors to be able to access those public structures or polling stations and vote freely. So that's to say, in the Northwest region, while choosing the public structures to host polling stations, we took into consideration the legal provisions and the security situation on the ground.
Despite concerns over hostile zones and the demand for greater transparency, political parties say they are prepared for the October 12th presidential election, an exercise many in the Northwest region view as a true test of both democracy and peace.
And in other news, finding ways to curb the high rate of hate speech and misinformation in the country 2 weeks to the presidential election is a hot file on the table of the government and stakeholders. The National Communication Council, alongside the United Nations organization, just ended a 3-day workshop that equipped journalists from both traditional and digital platforms with skills to better cover the elections while respecting the ethics and deontology of the profession. Asa Luciengu has more.
To the presidential election, there have been increased calls for the government to combat the rising trend of hate speech and misinformation in the country. Amidst this surge, the National Communication Council is urging media professionals, including journalists from both broadcast and digital platforms, to enhance their standards of professionalism.
Our reflections during this meeting should focus on covering several essential points that include adhering to professional and ethical standards.
A workshop aimed at providing essential tools and skills for covering the presidential election was convened in Douala.
Because you are the eye and ear of the public and have been trained on how to gather and treat information, that's why the Council has joined the United Nations system in trying to build your capacity through these several workshops that the UN systems has been organizing, to be able to equip the journalists and give them the necessary wherewithal so that they can effectively provide adequate and credible information to the Cameroonian public.
The 3-day workshop, organized by the National Communication Council in collaboration with the United Nations Organization, emphasized the importance of promoting peace, unity, and ethical journalism.
The UN is going around with all the key elements of integrity of information. Number one, we are working with the capacity building of journalists. Number two, we are going to deploy the access to digital platforms that are going to work in support to information verification, fact-checking, and also the monitoring of social media.
And we also are putting in place at the level of the council a crack team for information, for fact-checking. And that team will be able to debunk or give credibility. Our website will be fed 24 hours round the clock.
Implementing the knowledge gained is crucial for a free, fair, and transparent election.
And that's it for this first part of the news. Cameroon Today comes up next. The lack of potable water in Bonke village has left inhabitants at the mercy of waterborne diseases. For decades, the people of Bonke have been drinking from a stream which dries up during the dry season. Promises have been made for the rehabilitation of some of the taps in the village, but till date, no steps have been taken to ameliorate the situation of the people. Smaji Kangebe reports on the challenges faced by the people of Bonke village.
More than anywhere else, the phrase "water is life" resonates. Only that here, it is not a universal truth, but a daily battle for survival. With taps silent for years, the vast majority of residents rely on undeveloped and unreliable springs like this one. Children as well as adults have been suffering for the past 10 years. No water at Bonke. It's 7 years now. That calm water doesn't give us water again, and pipes broken here and there. The few taps identified here are dilapidated, and the water that flows from them is highly questionable. Unfortunately, the inhabitants can't refuse drinking water when they are so thirsty. Some elites open boreholes, but they have been abandoned. We use this water to cook, drink, wash dresses. You agree with me that this water is not drinkable. The development committee has tried to do something, but goats and cows have destroyed everything. To understand this ordeal, we decided to move with a family we had barely set off when we realized the extent of their ordeal. Miles done on foot through Bonahu bush. We walked again and again until we reached this river. We call it Matongo. This is where we fetch water to drink and bathe. But as soon as the dry season sets in, Matongo disappears. The river dries up, and with it, the hope of water. This is the lone water that we have here. When it stops raining, we are finished because it's difficult to get water. When water finally reaches different homes, it becomes a treasure. Every drop is counted and buckets rationed. It is with this that we use to cook, bathe, and drink. We fetch and keep for it to settle before we use it. Others who don't have the means boil the water and drink later. The consequences come at a high price. Waterborne diseases, children often sick, and weakened adults. In Bonken, the phrase "water is life" is meaningless. Water is there in Bonken because of the poor water quality. For the past 2 years, I'm visiting the hospital. They say I'm having typhoid. My kids are constantly sick, diagnosed with typhoid, malaria, and stomach disorder. And when it happens, we are forced to go to the hospital in town. We continued our movement to the local hospital. The place where the sick are taken care of also lacks the essential liquid, water. We fetch rainwater to work. It's about 3 to 5 years that we don't have water. We have many difficulties taking care of patients. In Bonken, nothing is simple. Every drop here is earned, and every glass is deserved.
And that's how we saw it on tonight's edition of Cameroon Today. Talking Point comes up next. My guest tonight on Talking Point is Professor Mark Anthony AKUHMBOM, a political analyst. Good evening, Professor. It's a pleasure to have you on Talking Point tonight.
Good evening, Makulet Fogwe. Thank you for receiving me on your platform, and it is indeed always a pleasure when I participate in programs on this platform. Thank you very much. It is indeed going to be an educative moment.
Professor, Minister Paula Tanganji reminds presidential candidates that 12 ballot papers have already been printed corresponding to the 12 approved candidates, and therefore no coalition or consensual candidacy can be considered at this stage. How do you respond to Minister Paula Tanganji's warning against opposition coalition?
I want to say yes. What Tanganji said in relation to the fact that the bulletins have been printed is true. What he said about the bulletins being present on the election day is true. But what he did not understand from that particular provision of the law he is quoting is the fact that that law is not talking about a matter of withdrawal. It is actually talking about the fact that those who withdraw their candidacy before the bulletins are printed can have access to their caution, to the money they deposit at the treasury, 30 million that they deposit at the treasury. It has nothing to do with withdrawal time. You can withdraw even at the last minute. It is your desire, it's your choice. And the idea of a consensus candidate, I think Mr. Tanganji was supposed to be telling Cameroonians that there have never been anything in the history of political sciences called consensus candidate in a democratic multi-party elections. Rather, he is there giving warnings which he should not be giving. That's not what he should be doing. Is it possible for these candidates to withdraw and form an alliance and stand behind one person? Yes. Even if their bulletins are present on the 12th of October. Their bulletins can be present on the 12th of October, but they form an alliance and support one candidate who becomes the candidate of the people. That is what can happen. But to say that you don't want to hear anything about a consensus candidate or whatsoever is a mistake. That's a wrong statement. Sincerely, that is not a statement that should be coming from a public administrator.
What implications does Minister Tanganji's warnings have for the opposition's chances in the 2025 presidential election?
You see, the first error that the minister made was to think that law, which let me quote it so that Cameroonians can get to know it, is section 147, subsection 1, part A, which says the deposit shall be refunded by the public treasury either to the candidate who withdraws their candidacy prior to the printing of ballot papers upon presentation of receipt of payment of such deposit and a receipt of withdrawal of candidacy duly established by the Director General of Elections, not the minister. So the minister has nothing to do with that. He should stop interfering into issues that do not concern him. When people withdraw is their choice. When they don't withdraw is their choice. So warning people is very, very controversial considering the fact that he's an administrator. And in relation to the opposition, the chances of the opposition in this presidential election, we had already told, when I talk of we, I'm talking of Cameroonians, the electorate, had asked these candidates to form this alliance long ago. I remember my civil society, our civil society, wrote letters to them asking for a formation of an alliance so that we can unify the votes of the people to make this election a referendum and not just a presidential election. But what did they do? They have decided to play politics and choose to wind time, and there we are in a situation where we are not supposed to be in. But is there a possibility for someone to win this election? Yes. Truly, it is the people that wins the election, not opposition parties. The electorate has the choice now to choose one candidate and fall behind that candidate and give him their votes. And that is what I'm calling for. Thank you.
What strategies might opposition leaders employ to respond to these warnings?
I think that asking me about the strategy that opposition parties can develop is trying to say we should squeeze water out of a stone. The opposition parties are going to participate in the election. Just watch me and see. Why? Because most of them are in this thing for what they can get financially out of it. They are thinking of their pockets. There are people who will not be willing to forsake their caution that they have deposited 30 million and the campaign money that is going to come. So what happens is they will, in all ramifications, participate in the elections just to get back their caution. But we will be happy to have a few of them who will forsake the caution, withdraw their candidacy, and align behind one person. It will be very powerful if some of them do like that. The 30 million is their money. And if they choose to forsake it in order to see into it that the future of this nation is preserved by coming together, be under one canopy, then let me be sincere, their names will be registered as those who made history. Their names will be registered as the politicians that think of the good of this nation.
According to critics, Minister Paul Athanganji's response seems to blur the lines between his role as representative of the government and his affiliation with the ruling party. What do you have to say about this?
You see, it is troubling. It is something that is very hurting. A minister who is working for the government, who is a direct affiliate and a member of the ruling CPDM, trying to tell an independent body how to run their affairs, that is terrible. That is terrible. Let me remind Cameroonians, according to the Electoral Code, Section 4, Subsection 1, Elections Cameroon shall be an independent body responsible for the organization, management, and supervision of all elections and referendum operations. Subsection 2 says, Election Cameroon shall perform its duties in keeping with the constitution and laws and regulations in force. Subsection 3 says, Elections Cameroon shall have legal personality and management autonomy, which implies that Elecam is supposed to be an autonomous body independent from the government, working for the good of the Cameroonian people. And so Mr. Athanganji, as a minister affiliated to the ruling party, should not interfere in the issues of the Elecam. And so what he is doing right now indeed is terrible, and it is funny because he is the highest person who talks about Cameroon is a law nation. It's a nation of law. But he is, in one way or the other, working against the laws of the nation. You cannot be putting your mouth in issues that does not concern you. Allow Elecam to do their job.
Speaking on RFE, Bello Buba Maigari expressed his willingness and determination to reach a coalition understanding with Issa Chimabakar and other opposition candidates ahead of the October 12th presidential election. We saw that yesterday on the news. He acknowledged that this is what Cameroonians who are hungry for change desire, thus pledged to relentlessly work to attain and achieved and, let's say, acceptable consensus. Do you think this coalition will bear the right fruits that Cameroonians are dying it off?
Vox Populi, Vox Die. The voice of the people is the voice of God. The opinion of the people is the voice of God. In a democracy, the people determine how you define your policies. You see, what Bello Buba is coming out now to say on RFE is something that if he, after his resignation, which I think is just 1 month or a few weeks ago, would have been clamoring for, because that had been the call of the people from all opposition party leaders know it. But he decided not to. They have been playing the ping pong game of self-interest, each individual walking on his lane. You can't come now at the tail end and say you are working for a consensus candidate as well as you are working for a coalition. Like I said, I will remind Cameroonians, there is nothing like coalition before an election. Coalitions only happen after elections, but alliances are formed before elections. And these alliances were supposed to have been formed by now. And since they have not been formed, let us not trust in their words anymore on this. Secondly, consensus candidate had never existed in any democracy. You can have a consensus candidate within a party, but not in an electoral election, a multi-party election. That would have been the first in Cameroon. But what we are saying is they would have created an alliance, choose to withdraw from the elections, and then endorse one individual and let us stand behind that person. That is the desire of the people. That's what the people wanted. And I think that if they consider the voice of the people to be sovereign, then they would have listened to the voice of the people and did what was necessary. But that's not the issue. So Bello Buba is just singing a song, and that song is falling on deaf ears because at this moment we are no more listening. A candidate has been chosen.
Thank you so much, Professor, for accepting my invitation on Talking Point tonight.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in your program. And please, I want to greet every Cameroonian, and I want to pass this message to all the electorate. Please, it is time for us to make good use of our voters' card. Unite behind one candidate. You already know the candidate, and I have already defined that candidate. Stand with him. Thank you.
Professor Mark Anthony AKUHMBOM, a political analyst based right here in the city of Douala, thank you so much for your time. And that's what put a cap to today's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for always staying with us, staying in the company of interesting programs on Equinoxe television. See you tomorrow, same time, God willing. Bye-bye for now.